the people on the Adult Faith Formation Committee, and I am so excited to introduce Jane Harness again. Dr. Jane Harness is one of, I think you are the only person who agreed to do 2 sessions back to back. I'm really appreciative of her willingness to do this. This is something that when we learned about parents' interest in this topic, we really wanted to devote 2 sessions to it. So as I introduced Jane more extensively last week, a couple of things. Jane is Dr. Jane Harness is the clinical assistant professor of psychiatry, who has really become an expert in mental health and social media. And last week, someone asked, where did your interest come from? And you mentioned came from your practice, that with the youth that she's working with, this and the parents, the struggle with social media is something that people are contending with now, and I'm sure will be contending with in the future. So she sort of has turned herself into an expert, and as what you'll see today, I think one of the things I really appreciate is that she's taking the research and then making it deeply practical for parents and for other people who are trying to positively influence youth with their social media use. Last week, she gave us some practical tips, count on social media, and gave us lots of other useful information on good resources and settings for sharing in social media. So if you didn't see it, we've now got a good version of it on YouTube. Which is great. And today, Jane's going to talk about practical information on how to manage time and different kinds of disconnection strategies, something which youth and adults can really benefit from. So Jane, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for the invitation. I think it's always really meaningful to be able to talk about this topic for people who are interested. So I really appreciate that. And I'll just start off by, just relevant to this talk today. I'll be talking a little bit more about the social media single session intervention that we designed to promote youth insight, self-efficacy, and knowledge to make changes on social media, and that was funded by the Research Scouts at Michigan Medicine. Okay, so for the learning objectives today, by the end of this talk, learners will have gained practical tips about how to manage time on social media, as well as different types of disconnection strategies, and access to additional resources for time management on social media. So we know that this is part of the picture. Last week we talked about content, and that's also very important. What people are viewing on social media and how they're interacting with social media is very important. So this is just part of the picture, but an important part nonetheless. So I'm just going to review this. We talked about this last week, but we think about social media use and youth mental health in a very complex and layered way. There's no one size fits all when it comes to this. And we know that social network site use is weakly associated with both higher levels of ill-being and higher levels of well-being. So that suggests that they're not simply the flip side of each other, and that both outcomes should be investigated in their own right. And so we know that there are certain aspects of social media that can contribute to ill-being, and then other aspects that maybe contribute to well-being for youth. So it's very difficult to kind of aggregate them all and come up with one big equation for how it's influencing, because there are different factors that might be influencing that, and some factors that we can modify, and that's what we'll be talking about today. These are just examples. This is, again, a refresher from last week. Different examples of contributions to well-being would be maintaining friendships and making new ones, finding community and support, sharing creative work, learning new information, exploring and expressing oneself, and then finding safe spaces, especially for people who maybe don't feel comfortable to express themselves or share in person. Contributions to ill-being would be exposure to harmful content, privacy and safety concerns, cyberbullying, which we talked a lot about last week. So I would direct you to the lecture from last week about that topic. Use, we're going to now be talking about today, use that interferes with sleep, exercise, homework, or family activities. So that's the time aspect that we're really going to be kind of narrowing in on today. And then low self-esteem due to unfair comparisons with others and overvaluing number of likes or shares, exposure to mis or disinformation, and participating in dangerous challenges. So of all of the information on here, we're kind of just going to be focusing in on that time variable. So this is just another review. We're going to hear from what youth had to say about time spent on social media, but this was a study that we did. We texted these 3 questions to youth ages 14 to 24 across the 50 states about what advice they'd give to young people who are new to social media, if they ever felt like they needed to change their social media use, and why, and have you ever deleted or thought about deleting your social media accounts, and why. So the results showed that a majority of respondents deleted or thought about deleting their social media account or app. And then related to this topic today, they were more likely to report wanting to change the amount of time they spent on their social media compared to the content they view. So to youth, this was actually the topic we're going to talk about today. The time spent was actually more important to them compared to the content, which is what we talked about yesterday, although we know that both are very important. They also employed methods to modulate their use because of this awareness. And so a big part of us learning from youth in this way was to then be able to hear what they had to say, how they changed their social media use, and reflect that back to their peers so that everyone has those chances to change their social media use in a way that could minimize their time spent if they wanted to really divert their time to other things in their lives. But a lot of people did find it difficult to eliminate it altogether. They would say things like, friends sent me a post from social media, so I had to re-download the app, or I felt left out, or I felt like I wasn't, I missed getting those messages, direct messages from my friends, things like that. So these are the different themes that came up. We coded all of the youth responses, and so what we're going to talk about today is at the bottom here, limiting time spent, and then kind of this idea of not losing control of how much time you spend or how it's influencing your life. So these are some quotes that I'll just share with you specifically about time. So this quote says, "The internet is far off from reality, and the more time you spend on it, the more you forget what real life is actually like. There are so many toxic, anonymous individuals and groups online that completely warp and kind of brainwash you." So this idea that maybe the more time you spend, but this combination of time and content in this quote, that the more time you spend, you can actually kind of go down a pathway where you're presented with more and more content that influences you in a certain way. Another quote was, "I felt like I need to cut down on social media because it affected my values." I thought that was pretty profound, that someone would say that, your core values to who you are were actually affected by your time that you're spending on social media. I set reminders on when to get off. So some people are actually maybe even setting a timer on their phone, or a timer outside of their phone, or setting the in-app reminders for when to log off social media. So kind of using different tactics to try to change the time that they've spent. And one person even said, "I've spent 20 plus hours a day in social media and was constantly comparing myself to others." So a lot of the time quotes also had a content component, right? Because part of the reason why the time being spent, excess time being spent, is problematic is because it's negatively impacting them in some way. So maybe they're comparing themselves to others. Maybe the content is really negative that they're consuming. And then there's also the factor, of course, of diverting time away from other things. Maybe they're not doing their homework. Maybe they're not spending time in person with friends. Maybe they're not spending time with family. Maybe they're not getting outside and doing different activities. So there's a lot of different kind of combined aspects when we think about time. It doesn't just kind of exist in a vacuum. So these are some tips when it comes to specifically social media use interfering with homework, because we hear this as a concern a lot, that when youth have their phones next to them, it makes it really hard to focus on getting their work done so that they can then go to soccer practice or, do whatever they need to do for their life. So adding structure around real life activities, environmental cues for media versus non-media use spaces. So if they're always sitting down to do homework at a specific desk, maybe that desk is kind of off limits for the phone to also be sitting on that desk. Maybe the phone has to sit in a different space so that they're not always kind of cued to automatically pick up their phone when they're feeling a little bit bored or feeling a little bit like they. Of course, breaks are good, but sometimes breaks can then turn into really extended breaks, and then they don't get back to the activity. Avoiding long stretches of uninterrupted social media use as much as possible. If they can break it up, if they can say, okay, I'm going to spend maybe 5 minutes looking at social media, and then once that 5 minutes is up, switch to something else. That can be really helpful. It gets kind of more difficult to disengage from social media use the longer they spend uninterrupted on it. So that's a tip. Consequences when it comes to like behavior. A lot of the times we hear about consequences related to screen use, and we always want the consequences to match in logic and intensity. And then for transitioning to adulthood, of course, we want this is something that's really hard, because a lot of the times youth will go from not having a phone to having complete unrestricted access to a phone, one day to the next. And we'd really like it to be more gradual than that if possible. So maybe that means introducing a phone that doesn't have internet access, that just has kind of some basic capabilities first. And then having a lot of conversations about social media use before they get their first smartphone. So that means just talking about the different potential benefits and dangers of social media use, and kind of hearing. I think it's also really helpful for them to hear from older kids, like older kids maybe in their family, maybe a cousin, maybe someone that they go to school with, about what they would say. Sometimes that information coming from an older peer is a lot more valuable to the young person than it coming from a parent or another adult figure in their life. So sometimes even just reading these things from these studies can be helpful to see, like, this is what a 14-year-old said about social media use and what advice they'd give to other kids their age about it. So that can be really helpful, just making sure that these conversations are ongoing, because a big thing that we want to emphasize is that they just like in real life, online life, there will be problems. There will be things that come up that make them feel upset, or maybe there's conflict. There's conflict on the playground, there's conflict online, right? So we want them to feel like they can reach out to their family member and say, like, this is what happened, rather than them keeping it all to themselves and then it becoming more and more of a problem and not being able to navigate those situations. So we want to, I guess my main thing that I'm trying to convey here is talk about it early and often. It's something that's really important. It's a huge fraction of life for young people, so it's really important that we're talking about it, and that they're not going from 0 to 100 overnight. I think we want to really try to make it as gradual as possible. Managing distracting cues. So there are different ways to kind of manage cues. So sometimes compartmentalizing work on different desktops can be helpful, or blocking certain distracting apps or websites all the time or during specific times. So maybe not having their social media automatically logged in if they're using it on the desktop. Maybe making sure that it's that those things are kind of have a certain time and place, rather than it being all together all the time, anytime. So those are some other tips. Making attention easier might mean putting the phone in another room during homework time, might mean headphones, might mean decluttering the visual space that they're working in. Sometimes incorporating movement can be helpful. Sometimes fidget tools or wiggle cushions or a sit-stand desk, those can be helpful. There are live listen options with certain types of headphones available. So if that's something that they're, maybe there's something else going on in the house and and that's kind of distracting for them, that can be helpful because then they'll just kind of tune into, whatever is going on in that moment. So now we're going to talk about disconnection options, and these were actually things that young adults reported from a study by Wynn et al. In 2021. So the first idea is disconnecting from devices altogether. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, but this means like not allowing phones or devices in certain areas. So maybe that's the dinner table, maybe that's the desk where they do their homework, but thinking about those physical spaces. Putting phones or devices away during social gatherings or holidays, that's kind of a rule. Of course, we know that youth aren't going to like that rule if they see their other adults in their family not abiding by that rule. So that can be really helpful. It's like, okay, if they see like their family member using their phone, maybe being very clear about like, okay, well, maybe the family member needs to use their phone because they're on call for something, or maybe they need to use their phone because they're waiting to hear from another family member about something important. So just being really explicit about like if the adult is breaking the rule, why the adult is breaking the rule. And then technology-free times built into routine. So maybe there's a certain time of day or a time where everyone is together that we really try to emphasize it being technology-free. So then disconnecting from specific platforms or apps. So this is kind of another layer. People can delete social media accounts. There's different ways that people can delete them. They can delete them altogether. So if the young person says, this is no longer serving me, I really don't want to have this Instagram account anymore. I'm happy to just continue with, maybe they have another account somewhere else, or maybe they just like to go on YouTube to watch videos about their interests. So maybe they want to delete it altogether. That means like everything that they've posted will be deleted, but if anyone ever took a screenshot of it, of course that still exists. So that's something to always think about. Even if you delete a post, it doesn't mean it's deleted forever. If someone did take a picture of it, it can still exist out there. But that could be something that, that they feel strongly about. Another way to delete a social media account would be to deactivate it. So that means that it's an option within the app, so that if they ever wanted to reactivate it, all of their content that they had previously posted would still be there. It would kind of be as if they're picking up where they left off, and then they still have that account. They still have the friends that they've made, etc. And then deleting the icons. So that sometimes it still exists, like someone could still visit their profile or see their pictures, but they want to delete the icon from their phone so that they don't have the option to click it. If they wanted to click it from their phone, they'd have to go and re-download the app, and so that it's on their phone again. So that's another way to kind of disconnect from a specific app if they feel like, I just don't want to have that so accessible to me that I can just quickly click Instagram or quickly click TikTok from my phone. They can delete the icon, so it still exists, but then they're less likely to engage in it on their phone. They'd have to do it through a browser, or they'd have to re-download the app. And then hiding the app in a folder. So there are ways to create folders. You can create folders within folders within folders if you really wanted to, and then kind of finally put the app in that last folder. So it takes 4 or 5 clicks instead of 1 click to get to that app that they're trying to open. So that kind of creates a little bit of a barrier so that they can be more intentional about it. They can think, Am I going to click through this 5 times to get to that app? Do I really need to see it right now? Or was this just an automatic thing where I'm just reaching for the phone and reaching for the app, and I'm not even thinking about it on a really conscious level? So it gives them that time to think like, do I really want to open this right now? And then tracking use, of course. So within the different apps, people are able to track their use. They can see how long that they've been on the certain platforms, or just through the iPhone or Android phone itself. There are ways that you can see how long you've been on certain apps. So maybe it will show you that you've been on Instagram for 15 minutes, and then you happen to watch a 20-minute lecture on YouTube, so it'll show 20 minutes for that. If you were texting back and forth with your sister all day, then it'll show, 1 hour for that. And so sometimes it'll kind of show you different things that you maybe didn't realize that you were spending as much time on certain apps as you are. So that can be helpful too, just to get that kind of data, I think, that you can see how much time you're spending in different apps. So disconnecting from specific content. So this is what we talked about last week, but we'll kind of go over it briefly here. You can turn off notifications, and that can be really helpful. So if let's say a young person posts a photo and they are getting a notification every time someone likes it or comments on it, then they're going to continue to open that app and see who liked it, who commented on it. I want to see. But if you turn off those notifications, you don't get all of those prompts to say, something happened on the app. So that can be really helpful. Using the do not disturb or airplane mode, that can also be helpful. Of course, then that kind of gets into the idea of like texting and overall communication. So if let's say they're at home, they really want to focus on their homework, and so they're just going to really put it on do not disturb mode. I would say the only time that gets a little tricky is, let's say they're maybe at a friend's house and they're working on their homework in do not disturb mode. Well, maybe their, parent or caregiver is trying to reach them. Then that can be challenging if they don't know where they are and they're not responding because it's in do not disturb mode. So that would be something to consider, because it does turn off your ability to communicate. It turns off, all functionalities for the most part. And then unfollowing or muting certain accounts. We talked about this last time. If there are accounts that maybe just are no longer serving the person, the example I sometimes give is, let's say, someone is really interested in soccer and they love soccer, but they just got an injury and they're going to be out for a while. And so they follow all these soccer accounts, and really seeing all that is kind of just bumming them out. It's just not so great for them anymore. They can mute those accounts so that they're no longer seeing all of that soccer content all the time. And then maybe they're healed and they can unmute the account and they feel excited about it again and they feel like they're not missing out. And then there are options to use content filters. So if there are certain things, like we talked about last time, if they see something that really is super upsetting to them, they can click on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, and they can click hide or block. And so then the algorithm learns that they don't want content like that. So let's say maybe it was about, just something that they just generally don't like. Maybe they don't like a certain musical artist anymore, and that artist keeps popping up in their Explore feed or their For You feed. Then maybe they would, could click on it and say, I don't want any more information about this musical artist, maybe. So we talked about this last time, but these are just some overall conversation questions that can be helpful in kind of starting a conversation. I think this is really important because we just want youth to feel like they can talk about this with us, right? We want them to feel like we're curious, we're interested, we're not going to, shame them or make them feel bad about something that happened on social media. These kinds of things happen in real life too. So we want to be able to help them navigate it. So what do you like about social media? What do you not like about social media? Which I think is a really interesting question. A lot of times it's easier to talk about your friends before you talk about yourself as a young person. So have your friends ever found themselves in a bad situation due to social media? Have you ever found yourself in a bad situation due to social media? What does it add to your life? What does it take away from your life? Tell me about your online friends, right? Because they might have some friends on there that they know from school. They might have some friends on there that they know from dance or from piano or something. But they also might have some friends that they've never actually met in real life. And then that's kind of a broader conversation, and kind of thinking about, how do you know this person is your age? How do you know this person is who they say they are? How did you even, become friends with them in the first place? Those kinds of questions, and really just coming from a place of curiosity. And I've definitely interacted with families who say that their child made an online friend and they FaceTime with them, and they are like really truly friends, and it's a big support for the person. So we don't want to just completely discount it. I think though it is important to make sure that it is who they say they are, and what the interaction is like, and kind of what's going on. Do you have any fake accounts or multiple accounts on one platform? Have you ever thought about changing your social media use? So really getting into kind of a motivational interviewing approach to social media use. We really kind of want to know, if they've thought about changing their social media use, if there are problems, and if so, would they want to change the time they spend? Would they want to change the content that they're consuming? Would they want to change their interpersonal interactions on social media? There are so many different things that could be changed. And then let's say they say to you, everything's good. Social media is all sunshine and, everything is wonderful. Well, then at that point, what would have to happen for you to feel like you want to make a change? Like what would be the point in your life where you feel like, yeah, I do think I need to actually kind of change something here. This isn't working like it used to. Maybe it would be that they're late for school every day, or maybe it would be that their grades are slipping, or maybe it would be that they've lost contact with their, in-person friends, and kind of helping them to think through that, like what would be the point where they would want to make a change. And then what are some steps that you could take towards changing whatever that goal is? So it's really about partnering with them on a shared goal and helping them to achieve that goal together. And then how can I help you with that goal? So, and we'll talk about the practical things we can do. Again, cyberbullying is very important. We talked about this last time, but have your friends ever been cyberbullied? Have you ever been cyberbullied? And it's important to ask, maybe not always using the word cyberbullied, but sometimes saying like, has there ever been drama, or online gossip, or has anyone ever threatened you, or has anyone ever said something mean about you on social media, or pretended to be you on social media? That's another way that, kids can cyberbully one another. And research tells us that they're really unlikely to tell someone if they're being cyberbullied, and if they do, it's most likely to be a friend, so someone their own age. They're really unlikely to go to an adult, unfortunately, and we know that also cyberbullying, either as a target or a perpetrator, increases a child's risk for suicide attempt. And then the other part of the research is that early ownership of a smartphone also increases a child's risk for being involved with cyberbullying. And then it's also important to ask about, like, what kind of content are they seeing? Are they ever seeing content that really upsets them? Are they ever seeing content that that feels like brings up, big emotions for them? And then specifically asking about any pro-suicide, pro-self-harm, or pro-eating disorder content. And all of these are kind of spectrums in themselves, right? Because it can very quickly go from kind of like a diet culture, social media content to actually like pro-eating disorder content. So that's something that is really important to ask about. Okay, so now we're going to get into the really practical side of this. So we're going to talk about how to change time settings on Instagram. And so I hope this sound will work.
I'm going to teach you about different settings that you can use to manage your time on Instagram. So we're going to go over to the settings, and we're going to scroll to your activity. And under this tab, we're going to go to your time spent, and it will show you how much time you're spending each day on the app. And so this can be helpful just for your own monitoring, but you can also set a daily limit. And when you set this limit, they will remind you to close Instagram once you reach that time. So they have settings for 15, 30, 45 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, or off. And then there's also sleep mode. And in sleep mode, your notifications will be muted during the times you choose. So you can choose which days and during which times. So that is a little bit about different settings you can use to manage your time on Instagram.
And I will say, like, for all of the different platforms, there's some version of this where you can see at least how much time you're spending on the app, and sometimes even set those reminders so that it's a pop-up that comes up. It'll say, you've reached your time limit of 15 minutes, now might be a good time for a break. So it is kind of that prompting, at least for a break. They can override it and say, I want to keep scrolling, or I want to, I was in the middle of a video, I want to at least finish that video or something. But it at least provides some prompting. And then, like I said, with the notifications, sometimes it can be helpful to have those off altogether. If for whatever reason the young person really wants to have the notifications on during the day, they can at least have them off at night. So this is, the more that they can kind of make this an individualized setting experience for people, I think the more that people will engage with those specific settings. And if we think about it from a harm reduction standpoint, having, either having all social media or no social media, sometimes we'll end up in a space where youth end up just using social media. So it's nice to at least be able to have some of these customizations. And I'm not saying at all that it's perfect. There's much more that these companies can do to make these things more customizable so that youth could reduce their harm and, also potentially increase their benefit. So we want to, but especially reduce harm. So we want to, from a mental health standpoint, a lot of us have been really trying to speak out and say we really need more, these companies to do more, to have different ways that people could individualize their use. And so, they're working on it, but by no means are we there, for sure not. We definitely need more different settings. We need more different things that ways that people can customize their use. So this is a QR code for a video that we created, and it has 4 different kind of, categories of features. So there's safety features, turning off like and view counts, time reminders, and changing the content presented. And there's also information about TikTok and YouTube settings. So this is just a video that has all of it together. So that can be sometimes helpful. And so today we just talked about the time reminders, but there are other things and other ways that you can explore the settings to change your social media use. There's also Instagram Teen Mode now, and so there's different features of that as well, and different settings to explore for Instagram Teen Mode. The American Academy of Pediatrics has family media plans, and we did talk about this a little bit last time, but it's essentially a list of different settings that families can pick and choose from that might be really fit in with their family. So maybe these are examples of the different kinds of things, but there can be keeping bedroom screen-free at night, avoiding screens during the hour before sleep, not texting while driving. Of course, that's a law in Michigan now. Keeping meals screen-free, exploring the privacy settings, which I think is so important. Last week we talked about, especially on Snapchat, how there's a feature where their friends can see exactly their location and how to turn that off. Emphasizing kindness, empathy, and respect. So a lot of the times we're thinking about the youth and how they're experiencing mean comments from other people, but we also want to make sure that they are good digital citizens and they're not, saying mean things to other people online. And I think that can get really challenging when, especially in today's day and age, a lot of the times, especially in video games, youth may not know if this character that they're interacting with is a bot or is a real human, is a real, like another little kid like them who's playing this video game. So that can be really hard because we don't want them, someone would interact very differently with a computer or like a robot than they would with another human. So it's very important to emphasize that and to really make sure that you're having conversations about that, because you want to make sure that that they're being nice online. And then also understanding how different types of content impact emotions. So yeah, these are the additional resources that I included last time. There's Children and Screens, which they have really wonderful resources on very specific topics. So they might have a resource about social media use and children with ADHD, or social media use and substance use, and the different ways that social media interfaces with those topics. So I really, really recommend all of and they really do get the experts on all of these different topics. So I really think if you have a specific question or a specific topic that you're interested in, they probably have a video about it. So I would recommend looking at their website. ACAP, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, we have different resources like Facts for Families, we have policy statements, and then the American Academy of Pediatrics, of course, and they have their family media plans, and those are really wonderful. And they have their Center for Excellence on social media as well. So if the school that your child goes to is interested in like a curriculum about social media, they have some information about that on their website as well. And then another resource that I think is really helpful is called PsychChild, and the website is www.psychchild.com. And they have information either in a video or in a written form about all of these different apps. So you might not have even heard of a certain app that your child is now using or all their friends are using, and so you can learn about it by this website, and you can see what it's like, you can see what the visuals are like, and that can be helpful. They also have information about the major video games as well. So if you want to know, especially from kind of a mental health standpoint, the risks and benefits of these different video games, that can be helpful. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this video. And so this is, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of our future directions in this space, because I think one of the main takeaways that I hope that people will receive from these talks is that each individual child is very different and unique, and the way that they're using social media is very unique. So you could have a 15-year-old who's really interested in let's say guitar, and so she's watching a lot of videos about guitar, and that's generally a positive thing, and maybe she's learning new chord progressions or something, and so that's generally a positive thing. But then you could also have maybe a child who's maybe a 17-year-old with ADHD, and they are tend to post a lot of comments on other people's pictures or on their posts, and then that leads to maybe some interpersonal conflict, and then kind of some regret of, I shouldn't have posted that, but I felt so strongly in the moment. And so that's such a different experience that 17-year-old is having on social media than the 15-year-old. And that is also just like minimizing the complexities of these situations. So it's really not a one-size-fits-all. I think everyone really would love to have a one-size-fits-all answer to this really complex topic, and that would make life a lot easier, but it's just not the case. And so for each unique child with their unique life experiences leading them to that point, and their own sometimes mental health situations that they're in, or sometimes their personality style, all of these things combine for them to have unique experiences online. And the way that people use social media is so different. There are so many different affordances. Some people might just scroll. Some people might post themselves. Some people might send, things that they feel like are really relatable to their friends. Some people might end up liking a lot of things or commenting on a lot of things. So the way people interact with social media is so unique. So I think it's really hard to say a very broad, one-size-fits-all approach. So this is what led us to our work, which is a really intervention-focused future direction. So there's been a lot of time devoted to really learning as much as we can about the relationship with youth mental health and social media use. But at the same time, we really need to be helping the youth who have identified that they would like to change their use. So we really want to figure out how we can do that. So we really want to have an individualized approach so that youth can learn and kind of develop insight, because that's the first step, right? If people are going through and feeling like there is no problem with their social media use, they're not going to change it because they think everything is fine. So the first part is to really help them develop that insight, to say, like, to look at different stories. So we have it set up where it's first some stories of other peers, and we ask them to basically give their input about how they think that social media experience is influencing their well-being or ill-being. So they are really invited to think about these other peers their age, and then that can kind of help them to develop insight. We ask them about their own social media use and how do they feel like different things related to their use is impacting their well-being and their ill-being. And then we talk about these practical things that they can do, these setting changes that they can make, and these different things that they can do in their real lives to try to minimize harm. And then really help them to have that self-efficacy that, like, yes, I can make this change. I know that my peers have made these changes, and so I'm going to go ahead and try to make this change for myself as well. Because I think that's really where we need to take this work in the future, is to partner with youth about shared goals and to really help them understand how it can affect them before they even start using it, and then to partner with them to optimize their use once they are using social media. So that's really kind of a little brief introduction. It's to give you a little bit of background, it's a web-based, it takes about 30 minutes to complete intervention, and it has a couple of stories, like I said, then some time for reflection on their own social media use. Then it has some videos about practical changes that they can make, and then invites them to think about their next steps in changing their social media use. So that's a little bit about that, and we're in the process of piloting it right now. And we did receive youth feedback on it. So we did some focus groups with youth to see what they thought about it, and they actually really liked it. I was very happy to hear that they liked it, and they also liked doing it in a small group, like we were doing. So it might be something that I could see happening. You know, the reason we wanted it to be online, that it could be really accessible, so that any child or youth who wanted to use it could find it and use it. But it might be something where, to really get the maximum benefit, to hear from each other how they all feel about social media use, that can be also very reassuring and comforting to know that they're not the only ones struggling with their social media use. Maybe we could do small groups in schools or small groups at the workplace for young adults. So it's a little bit about that project, and these are my references. We're a little over on time, I'm sorry. Yeah, just wanted to open it up for questions now.
How do I get my kids in your program? Can you run them through? Is there like they could volunteer, you could practice on them?
There is a piloting part.
Okay.
So we're moving forward soon with the piloting. We incorporated their feedback from the focus group, so it was very fun to hear from them and to hear what they think should be changed. And in the there were little things like in the stories, they were like, "Oh, that name, we haven't heard that name in years, so we don't think that here would have that name." So we changed some of the names in the stories. And then just a couple of other things. They wanted more information about a little bit more about the research behind it, so we added some of that in. And they wanted a little extra information, more videos about other platforms, so we added in TikTok and we added in Snapchat. So yeah, once we have finalized that, our plan is to email the link out and to different groups and have people give their feedback about it. So then hopefully at that point we can then incorporate that feedback and have kind of a finalized version that can be used at any time. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Do you think the schools are doing all they could do to address this very important issue?
That's a great question. I think it's I think the most heartbreaking thing about it for me is that some schools are doing a lot and some schools are not doing anything. And I think that is really sad to me because I think all youth deserve to know, how social media can affect them, how they can change their use, and especially media literacy. I think it's so important, and I talked about this last time. It's so important for a young person today to see something online and to be able to take a step back and say, is this real? Is this a real photo? Is this a real photo from the event that they're saying it's linked to? Is this has this photo been altered in any way? Has this photo been recontextualized to a different setting or situation? Or has this photo actually been completely created by AI, right? Because we know that that's something that's going to happen. So there's different names for all of these things, but and then thinking of even just information. Is this a reputable source? Especially when we think about things like health information, that's so important and affects their health decisions. Is this person who's giving this information, do they have the background to really be giving this information, right? I wouldn't go to my sister for advice on my car, because she doesn't know anything about how to fix a car. So, I think that's the world that they're living in, is that, people are giving sometimes just misinformation, and they don't mean to be sharing misinformation, but there are really focused and targeted disinformation campaigns out there where people are really intentional about putting out information that's not correct, and there's a motive behind it. It's either for profit or for political gain or whatever it may be, that unfortunately they're putting out this intentionally false information. So, and I think it's something that's so important for young people today, and I think it should have been, across the board in schools years ago, because it's going to affect us all, because these are things where there are policies that people are going to vote for, and they're going to base that information off of things they're seeing on TikTok. That's the truth. That's the truth of the matter. They're going to base their decisions off of things that they read online. So it's so important to have that training, to take that step back and say, is this real? Is this factual? Is this coming from an institution I trust? Is this coming, or could this potentially be coming from some other organization that has another motive? And then to really recognize the different tactics they have. Sometimes they'll put forth like a scarcity tactic where they'll say, you better watch this now. That this was the case with the Plandemic documentary. They said, you better watch this now. They're going to take it down. Watch it before it's gone. And of course, it was all fake information. And so for youth to be able to identify that, like, hey, this is a tactic that they're using to try to get me to buy into this idea that they want me to view in this video, is so powerful. For them to be able to step back and say, let me think about this for a second. This sounds like what I learned in school. This sounds like that scarcity tactic that they told me about. So I think that is something that I feel very strongly about, and I really hope that there will be more education. A good organization for that is called NAMLE, NAMLE. They do a lot of media literacy information. So if we could have gotten that into the schools years ago, and the truth is, it really should be everywhere. It should be equitable, because some youth who don't have that training will then make a health decision that impacts their life. That is very unfortunate that they didn't have that training, because we know how powerful these social media sites are, and how powerful that amplified messaging can be. So sorry, that was such a long answer, but I do feel really strongly about it being in schools. I think it's very important.
Thank you again for all the information you provided for us, and for your own research as well. and what you're working on. I have a question about whether you have any material that's that young people can see where how undead the things are that they take off their website, and where that information resides, where the archive is, the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine or whatever, because that's, I know for even for when I worked with doctoral students at the university, some of them were worried about sites that they had had earlier in their lives, because that's going to be available, that information will be out there for potential employers to find. And it's hard to tell a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old that when you're going for a job later on, material that you put on in your youth will be available. So do you have a part of your project that's looking at that?
That's a great question, and that was actually one of the themes that was brought up in the My Voice study was everything is permanent online. And so I think just that message that, they could go and read the whole privacy or the whole user agreement, when people sign up for Facebook or sign up for Instagram, but it's very, it's very lengthy, it's very dry, it's very, I think it'd be rare that an adult would read the whole thing. It's a lot. But they've been able to get away with a lot because of people click, yes, I agree to the terms, of this social media platform. And actually it led to a study, and this is another kind of reason why these platforms are so powerful. It led to a study where they actually manipulated Facebook users' feeds many, many years ago, and they wanted to see if by showing people more positive or negative content, did they themselves then post more positive or negative content. Well, they manipulated hundreds of thousands of users' feeds, and it was all okay based on the agreement to the terms of use that everyone signed before they started the platform. But that's just to say that they don't have to stop there, right? They made a slight change to the feeds of hundreds of thousands of people. They could make a major change to the feeds of even more people. So they have really, really massive amounts of power that they hold because people do sign, they check off the use of service. So, but to your question, I think it is so hard because youth, nowadays they can't make a mistake. They can't make a mistake online. They could make a mistake in class. They could say something that hurt their friend's feelings and repair and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. I wasn't thinking when I said that. But that comment they made online is gonna, can be there forever. So it's so hard. You want to say beware of this, but at the same time, nobody's perfect. You don't want to, really. It's hard because the other comment the other theme that we found was, not to take it too seriously. So I think it's a balance of of course, try to exert extra caution in what you post and say online. Try to think if my employer were to see this one day, would I be okay with that? But also to say not to be too hard on yourself. If you do post something and you think gosh, I really shouldn't have said that, of course you can take it down, but it's hard to know if someone, I think more likely is that someone took a screenshot of it or took a picture of it. But I think that it's hard and it's easier. It may be in some ways easier to repair things in person than online. But I think it's a balance of that messaging. On the one hand, you want to say, well, let's prepare you as best as we can and make sure you don't, say something that you regret. But at the same time, to say inevitably people will make mistakes. You won't post the perfect thing every time, right? And that's part of it too, is to not have, especially when it comes to pictures, right? to not have these like unattainable standards. So I think that's it's hard. I think it's hard to be a young person online today. And so also just to kind of have a little bit of grace with them too, that, humans are imperfect, and we're going to try our best, and we're going to keep trying our best and keep trying to improve, but trying to repair, especially if it's interpersonal, trying to repair that as much as you can. Yeah.
One last question. Is the U of M Depression Center proactive in educating with the public schools, and how is that being received?
That's a great question. I personally am not a member of the Depression Center, but I will think about that and see. I know that they do like a peer-to-peer program. I don't know if any of that is related to social media. But that's a good question. I think that it would be great to have the university, really help in this way, and go out to the schools with interventions that have been studied and can help. Yeah, and maybe that's something we'll do with our intervention. Hopefully, one day, once we've done more testing and making sure that it's helpful.
Jane, this is my little signal that says we have to stop. Although I think that there's a number of questions your studies and presentation have raised, and I just want to say, it's so great to hear your passion. And just I can imagine if someone has you as a counselor or a therapist in some way, and I love the fact that you're doing at that level and at the policy research level. So boy, I'm going to watch your little star rise as you're doing this, because I think you're doing really important work, and we're so grateful that you took 2 Sundays to come here. And this is I know we gave you a little candle last time. You are the first person to get these new little thank you gifts, so thank you very much for coming. Here you go. Thank you so much. You're welcome.